Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how
He's alive!
Welcome to where the weird ones are.
Every time I speak, I want the truth to come out.
Powerful figures in Hollywood as well as powerful politicians who are in fact not human. They're reptiles or they're lizards or perhaps extraterrestrials.
I don't think it is a human. I think it's a Sasquatch.
Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.
Let's get weird.
What's up, you fucking weirdos? Welcome to another episode of Where the Weird Ones Are. My name is Kevin, but you probably already knew that, and if you did not, now you do. Today's episode is with Jeff Foran. He is the host at Strangeology, and if you don't know that podcast, then you're living under a rock because it's a very popular one, and I also enjoy it. And he puts out a lot of like cool information about, cryptids and like folklore and ancient history kind of, because I remember the first time I ever listened to his podcast was like 2 or 3 years ago, and he was covering Tartaria. So anyways, if you haven't checked out his podcast, you should probably do that. Anyways, so we discussed some of Jeff's early like childhood and stuff about some of his strange encounters. He encountered something what he thinks is a UFO. Well, actually it's pretty positive it was some sort of UFO, definitely not human. And his brother was present, and his brother just acted like nothing was happening, and then years and years later, come to find out his brother was very well aware of those lights. So yeah, and he tells a story about a family in Palmyra, Maine that were plagued by dogman type creatures. So he tells that story. It's a good story. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed talking to Jeff, and I hope I get to have him on again for something of some kind. But yeah, he's a good dude. So show him some love. His birthday was just last week, so he just turned 21. So you got to send him some donations for his 21st birthday. I'm just kidding. But no, yeah, go check out his stuff. His link tree is in his bio on Instagram. You can find him at strange.ology on Instagram. You can, I believe, strangeology.com is his website. But regardless, I'm going to put his link tree in the show notes. So please show him some love. Also, if you like today's episode, please like, follow, share, and subscribe. That is the best way to help this show grow. Also, go check out the website, where the weird ones are podcast.com. You can find the merch store there, the blog, chat room, but the chat room is to get the is password blocked. So to get the password, you have to become a Patreon member. And then what else is in there? I think that's it. I mean, there's pictures of people wearing the merch, and stuff like that. April 13th, I will be in Hamlet, North Carolina at Encounter Quest. I will be vending some fucking hot sauce. And I had the label made up for the hot sauce. It's pretty fucking dope, and it's right here if you want to check it out. I like it. I like this a lot. All right. But anyways, What else? Oh, 40 and Fest is June 8th. I will also be vending there, selling my hot sauce there, as well as t-shirts. So go check that out. So go to encounterquest.com for tickets to Encounter Quest in Hamlet, North Carolina. Go to 40 and Fest on Facebook to get your tickets for that on June 8th, right here in Sanford, Maine at the Memorial Gym. The Paranormal 5 have organized this, and I cannot wait. I'm super excited. I will be at other events throughout the spring and summer and fall, but we'll see. I'm going to have to be a little selective with having a newborn. So, but I tend to get to as many as I possibly can this year. A lot more than I did in 2023, because I only went to 3. Well, I went to 4 technically, because I went to one in Maine, right here in Maine, because it was fucking easy. It was only like 2 hours away. But I went to Squonkapalooza. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go to Squonkapalooza this year, but I am thinking about it. But if you guys are in the area of Hamlet, North Carolina on April 13th, please come say hi. If you're in the area of Sanford, Maine on June 8th, also please come say hi. And that's all I got for you as today's. But yeah. It was a rough week last week. Didn't sleep well, but it's all good in the hood. I don't think I have a random fact for you this week, because I was gonna start doing random facts. I just can't think of one off the top of my head, which I was trying to kill time. Like, I was trying to stall a little bit so I could try and think of a random fact that I know, but nothing's coming to my fucking brain right now. So, you know what? Again, show Jeff some love. Like, follow, share, subscribe. Leave a comment and a review. 5 stars, I would appreciate it. But obviously, you give me whatever you feel I deserve. But a review, I would love a review. And I'll read them on here. Also, you can rate and review the show through the website if you want to do it that way. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is episode 89, Strange Lights with Jeff Foran.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Weird. Get weird.
What's up, party people? I am here with Jeff from Strangeology Podcast. Jeff, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I know we just asked each other how each other was doing just a little bit ago before we started recording, but for the sake of the podcast. But if you don't mind, for the people that don't know you, which I find it a little hard to believe, being in the same realm, that people haven't come across your podcast, but just in case there is any of them out there, if you don't mind letting them know who you are and what it is you do.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Stoked to be here. And so I'm Jeff. I run Strangeology, the host of the Strangeology Podcast. I also have multiple social media presences on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. I'm everywhere. I talk about cryptids, conspiracies, the paranormal, ancient mysteries, the strange and unexplained in a nutshell. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm stoked to to chat and get into a whole bunch of weird topics.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, I think the first ever episode that I heard of yours was on Tartaria, and I find that whole like theory and the conspiracies revolving around it like super interesting. And I think you were on the confession. Tony Merkel had you on the confessionals to talk about it, and then I was like, I just heard this guy talking somewhere. Where does this guy sound familiar? And then I realized, who you were and everything. So, what what was it that got you interested in following this path of jumping on the podcast train?
Well, I guess my story is probably similar to a lot of people who are into all things Fortean. When I was a young kid, I would always find myself gravitating towards books in the school library, which was kind of funny that like the school library when I was in 5th and 6th grade had these books, but books on UFOs and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, all these like really old books from like the 50s and 60s and 70s. I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s, so probably dating myself a little bit, but when I was in 6th grade, I wrote a report on Nessie and how I was like, maybe it's some kind of relic plesiosaur dinosaur that survived the big extinction 65 million years ago or something like that. But yeah, I always found myself gravitating towards the subject matter. I used to love watching shows like Sightings and later on like Monster Quest or UFO Hunters and stuff in the early 2000s. And it was always just something that was there that I would love to look into every once in a while. And after the pandemic started in 2020, I had worked at a job for close to 13 years. And unfortunately, it was like a perfect storm. And I was already kind of like, maybe thinking about looking for other stuff already to do. I just started a family and just got a house. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, I got let go from my job. And so I was just kind of trying to figure out what to do, looking for work. And I decided to start a Instagram to pass the time. I would notice every once in a while things would pop up on my feed that were like Mothman or Bigfoot and this conspiracy or that conspiracy. And I was just like, that sounds like kind of fun. Maybe I can do that. So I came up with the name Strangeology one day, just thinking, and threw a logo together, a background in graphic design. So I threw all that together myself and just kind of started posting, and people started following the account, and it just kept kind of snowballing. And by the end of the year of 2020, I had made friends and acquaintances in the community who also had podcasts. And what I was doing with Strangeology at the time was kind of doing picture carousel posts, like informational little factoids on different cryptids or strange stories and happenings. And I really loved getting into the nitty gritty and the details of all these different stories. And I figured that a podcast format would be really good for doing that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. And so at the end of 2020 is when I launched the very first episode. And now we're just about 60 episodes in, try to go on a bi-weekly release, but sometimes life schedule gets a little wacky, so it's hard to keep up sometimes, but it's been a lot of fun. And last year, was it last year or was it 2022? Geez, I can't remember now, but I think it was 2022. I decided to start putting a lot more effort into video content creation as well. And that has been a lot of fun and has really catapulted a lot of my social media to a lot of people, which has been awesome and super fun. But yeah, that's kind of the history of Strangeology and how it started.
Well, I gotta say, man, I like the name is really good, and the logo that you made is amazing.
Thanks.
And then I have my friend David. I don't know if you will recall his Instagram because I'm pretty sure he follows you. But it's down the rabbit hole. And I was talking to him. Shoot, I think it had to be like right after I had coordinated a date with you, and because I knew he followed you, and I was like, "Oh, I got Jeff from Strangeology," because he was asking. He's like, what guests do you have lined up?" And I was telling him a couple of them, and I was like, "Oh, and Jeff from Strangeology is gonna be on." He's like, "Oh man," he goes, "that guy's reels are on point." He's like, "I love that guy." He's like, if I could make reels the way that he makes them, he's like, I'd probably be just as good as him and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I'll ask him how he makes his reels. So, what do you use for your reels?
Yeah, sure. So, going back to like my the previous life as a professional graphic designer, I also had like a little bit of knowledge from back in the college days of video editing, and so I kind of knew how to put some stuff together, and I worked exclusively using like Adobe Photoshop and stuff like that, and some of the other programs as well. But Adobe Premiere is what I use to do all of my video editing. When I was first starting to blow up on TikTok, I was using the in-app editor and I hated it because you can't really get in there and do like fine edits and like add different effects or, really customize it to the way you want it to be. So that's what I use. And
Okay.
there's a little bit of a learning curve to the program, and there's other apps out there that can do similar things for sure, but that's just kind of what I know from years of working in this kind of stuff.
Perfect. So, we are in the same area, kind of, sort of. We're both in New England. So did you guys get a lot of snow this last week?
Yeah, we I think we got close to a foot, and right before
Wow.
that we didn't have anything. Everything melted because right before Christmas we did have, I think, about 6 inches of snow where I am,
Mm-hmm.
and it warmed up to like 60 degrees and everything melted, and the town that I'm in flooded. And it also flooded over the summer during a period where we had like 4 days of sustained rain. And so that wasn't very fun, but thankfully it wasn't as bad as it was over the summer. But but we have snow again, and I think we're supposed to be getting more snow this weekend, maybe. I'm not sure. Sometimes it starts snowing and it's not even in the forecast. So, typical New England weather,
Exactly. Like it was below 20 degrees the other day, and then today is like almost 50, and we've lost because we got almost around 8 inches, and now it's almost all gone.
Oh, wow.
And then
That's wild.
Hampton, New Hampshire is like less than an hour away from me, maybe like a half an hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was completely underwater at the beginning of this week. Like
Wow.
almost the entire town.
That's
So
wild.
it's and then I think Old Orchard Beach too was underwater, a lot of it. So
Jeez.
there's a lot of flooding going on, I guess.
Yeah. I saw some videos online yesterday of I think it was Hampton actually, where just the whole oceanfront was just like, not good, not good.
Yeah. So Jeff, curious, have you ever had any paranormal experiences? And if so, what would you recall being the earliest experience you've ever had?
Oh, the earliest experience. Well, to answer your question, first off, yes, I have had multiple experiences with the paranormal in my life. Things that I've thought about and tried to debunk in my head, but I haven't been able to explain ever. But I would say the first, one of the first experiences I had was probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I was hanging out in the living room of the house I grew up in, which was on 5 acres on top of a hill in the woods in a town with a population of 3,000 people in rural Vermont. And, we had neighbors nearby, but, and I was just watching cartoons, kind of winding down for the night. And I hear my mom from the kitchen say, like, Jeff, it's time to brush your teeth and go to bed. And I'm like, okay. So I turned off the TV, and, this was what, mid 90s and early mid 90s. And we had one of those big old CRT TVs that weighs 200 pounds in the living room, which, you turn those off, they have afterglow, if anyone out there remembers that. And I turned off the TV, and it was on, I don't know, some kind of Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, something like that I was watching. And I looked at the TV after I hit the remote to turn it off, and there was this face in the TV of an old man with glasses, male pattern baldness, just kind of looking at me. And I was just like, that's weird. I'm going to leave the room now and not acknowledge that's there. Kind of like, if you saw it, no, you didn't type of thing. And years later, I remember looking through photo albums and seeing pictures of my grandfather and my dad's dad. And it looked just like the guy that was the face that was on the TV. Wow. And my grandfather, I never got to meet him. He passed away from cancer about 3 months after I was born. And so, part of me wonders, like, was that him? Maybe he was just kind of checking in or something like that. I'm not sure. But yeah, that was probably one of the first, if not the first, but one of the earliest memories I have of experiencing something that I couldn't really explain. And that house had a lot of other weird happenings going on at it too. If I can share a few more if you'd like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really comforting to, like, just think that it was, your grandfather too. But, like, I think it's because my sister has a similar experience where she saw what she thought was me sitting next to her in the screen of the TV when we were kids.
Interesting.
When she had shut it off, and then she, like, turns to look, and I'm not sitting there. Like, she had a lot of, like, doppelganger experiences throughout her life. She was co-hosting this show with me for a little bit, but she had a baby and stuff like that. So, she was always like, I'm tired. And then I do this show late too. And she's like, and I'm like, it's at 7:00. She's like, I will probably be sleeping. And I'm like, okay, all right. I'll just let you do your thing. If you ever want to come on, just let me know. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I think it's really cool to think that it was your grandfather, even if it may not have been. But
yeah. And there was there were some other experiences in that house. My oldest sister used to like to play with Ouija boards, And
Oh boy.
yeah. And I remember there was one time where her and my brother were messing around with it one afternoon, and they, you know, I go back and forth on whether or not it's some kind of subconscious thing moving the planchette, or if there is actually something paranormal going on. But I'm a little kid at the time, and I'm like, I know that like Ouija boards aren't to be like disrespected or messed around with. You need to be careful with what you're doing with them. And they were, I guess, contacting an entity that said it was my grandfather, going back to my grandfather, but I wasn't sure.
Oh
But
my.
that night at dinner time, we got a phone call, and my parents were always like, let the phone ring at dinner or nobody call us at dinner. And I think my sister went to go pick up the phone, and there was like no one on the line. And then a couple minutes later, she went to go answer it again, and she was like, I don't know, I think we're like being pranked or something. And then a couple more times went by, and I was like, I'm going to run and answer the phone. And, I'm around the same age, like 7, 8, 9 years old. And I go pick up the phone, and I'm like, hello. And this like weird, ghostly, like frail sounding voice comes through, that was asking for somebody in the house that didn't live there. There's nobody in my family named that. It was really bizarre. So I just like hung up the phone. I was like, yeah, no. Like that could have been like a prank. I don't know. But it was bizarre, especially like in connection with the usage of the Ouija board earlier that day. So yeah.
Hey everyone, it's me, Stephanie, the hostess of the Macabre Family Podcast. Join me and my whole Macabre family every week as we tell you all the tales of spooky, kooky, creepy, freaky, hairy, you name it, we got it at the Macabre Family Podcast. Join us every week on all listening platforms. Stay spooky.
And then the house itself had a presence in it. There were times where you would be alone in the house, and this would happen even until like my teenage years, where you'd be walking around at the house, and you'd feel like something was following you or watching you. And incidentally, I never experienced this, but my brother and my father, both told me that they had experienced waking up in the middle of the night with their bedroom being like ice cold, typical introduction of paranormal phenomena in that kind of scenario, right? And
Absolutely.
their bed was shaking, or respective beds.
Oh,
they didn't share a bed.
jeez.
Yeah. And my dad told me one time he woke up in the middle of the night and the bed was shaking, and I don't remember if he turned on a light or something like that, but he could like see the breath because it was so cold. And like that house was always warm, and in that particular time, he heard a voice say his name, and it wasn't my mom or any of my siblings. I think all my siblings at the time had moved out, lived in college or whatever. And that, definitely threw him for a loop for sure. And I think it happened a few times, but eventually I think my dad came to the conclusion that whatever this entity, the spirit was kind of, it wasn't malevolent. It was more kind of like it just wanted to mess around. And
A trickster
play
kind of
tricks.
thing.
Yeah. And he had this theory that the previous home owner, the house was built in the 70s, so it wasn't an old house, but the man who built the house, his son had graduated from high school and died in a motorcycle accident like a month later. I don't know what year it was. I think it was probably like the late 70s, because my family moved into the house in 85. And he had this theory that whatever this spirit was may have been the son, that had been, still connected with the house and may have wanted to hang around. But one time, the final time, I guess, that anything ever happened, my dad actually acknowledged the entity and was like, hey, I don't want to play anymore. Like, this needs to stop. Like, I have work in the morning. Come on. and it stopped, apparently. So yeah, that was just a weird thing. I'm glad I never experienced that, because that would have definitely freaked me out more so
for
than,
sure.
But there was another time where we had I think this was when I was a teenager, where I remember waking up one morning and going out into the living room, and we had like a fireplace in the living room that had a mantle over it, and there was this like big portrait that was like a scene, like a nature scene with some like ducks flying in it. And I always stayed up later than my parents, and they had gone to bed. Everything was in order when I went to bed. But when I woke up, I remember coming out into the living room in the morning, like walking to the kitchen to like go get a glass of water, and the painting was laying flat down, like face down on the living room floor. And my mom had a whole bunch of like knickknacks all over the mantle, and none of them were disturbed. The glass, it was like it, I don't know what did it, but the portrait had been somehow lifted off of the 45-degree angled nail, which was still there. Wasn't like it moved like that. And if that happened, it would have hit the mantle, knocked everything else off, and then hit the tile that was in front of the fireplace and shattered. It was sitting square on the carpet that was beyond the tile, not damaged. It was like something lifted it up, put it down. And I was just like, that's something. And not really, that never happened again. So that was just like a weird occurrence. There was another time where my mother, her best friend passed away. I think it was about 25 years ago at this point. And my mom kept a picture of her in our kitchen, and she put down like a bunch of like, I can't remember what it was. If it was like peppers, it was some kind of vegetable in a bowl, like right near her portrait. And the next morning her portrait was face down, and she hated whatever the vegetables were in the bowl. So it's like, okay, maybe she paid a visit and was like, hey, don't put that stuff in front of my picture, please. Yeah. So
That's
weird happenings for sure. And I can share one more story from that property that is something I definitely cannot explain. So one evening, we had an above ground pool in like the early mid 90s in our backyard. And sometimes I would go swimming at night and or like early evening. And this particular time, my mom and her best friend, her late best friend who passed away that I just mentioned, they were sitting on the pool deck, chit-chatting, smoking cigarettes and stuff. And I was just kind of puttering around the pool, and all of a sudden these like bats start dive bombing the pool, because there's bugs that, that try to get water in the pool and then they just don't make it back out. So the bats are like coming down for water. Maybe they're trying to get bugs. I don't know. So I'm getting dive bombed, and I like keep going underwater. And one of the times I come up, I'm facing the backside of our property, which is just like woods for, gosh, I don't know, a mile or two or something before the next house. And all of a sudden I see this like large beach ball sized warm orange ball of light dart past to, as I'm facing the backside of the property, like to my left, and it just kind of like zips through the trees in kind of like a southwesterly direction. And I was like, what the F was that? And I was like, okay, I didn't really see anything, right? And I just kind of ignored it in my head, kept on swimming around. And like 5 minutes later, I surfaced out of the water again. And I'm just kind of like waiting in the pool. And I'm looking towards like the southwesterly direction, which is kind of towards where the pool deck and the house is. And the same exact warm orange beach ball light thing comes back from the other direction. And it's just like, it's this really fast movement. And somehow it's maneuvering through the trees. And, you know, you read stories about spook lights and stuff like that. The will-o'-the-wisp type of thing. And that's the best thing I can equate it to. You know, it's like, I don't know. We had a very small, like little swampy area in the backside of the property, which I'm like, oh, is it swamp gas? No, it's not swamp gas. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we lived around a lot of forest, so maybe it was something to do with that. I can't necessarily equate it to being like extraterrestrial. But yeah, that was just like a really, really weird thing that happened there. Never happened again, but
That's interesting. So I've talked to two people now, you make the third, that have seen an orange ball of light, of some kind, just roaming around the woods. Well, this woman, Victoria, she was in Texas. She lives in Texas, and her husband, saw an orange ball in the sky. And then this gentleman, Shane, in North Carolina, I believe, he saw like several orange balls, like basically just like in unison, following each other through the woods.
Interesting.
And he was so like captivated by what he was seeing. Like he felt like really good. Like it was a nice warm feeling when he saw it. And he stopped his car. He got out and he just watched them, and they're just like floating by him, and then they just go right out into the woods following each other, and then they're gone. And he's just like, whoa. And I was like, you didn't get a video? He's like, no. He's like, do you ever experience anything and think to pull out your phone? And I was like, no, I've never experienced something. And it was like immediately, I need my phone. But yeah, no, that's it. I mean, on the show so far, those are the only other two, but I've heard so many stories of these orange balls, and so this was all on the same property. All
yes.
these stories that you just told.
Yes. Surprised me.
And were they
like, yeah.
Yeah. And was it also in Vermont?
Yes. Yes.
So, my first paranormal experience ever was in Lancaster, Vermont. We lived in a trailer out there on a side of a mountain. I can't remember what mountain it was, but
okay.
We were out there, and I saw shadow people. And my sister she said it was a witch.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this girl's crazy. You know, my dad's in there trying to comfort her and all this stuff. And I was just like, oh, she's crazy. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And then I walk into my room, and these two figures just go right by my window. And I was like, what the hell was that? And
oh, wow.
like the trailer sat up pretty tall. So like if somebody was just walking around the property or around the house, like you wouldn't be able to see them from the window just because we were so high up.
Yeah.
So like I was like that they were flying. So I like to say they were just two witches going hee flying by the window on their brooms.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've have you ever heard? So I've heard something about Lancaster. I don't know if it's Vermont, but if people just are because mentioned that I lived in Lancaster, Vermont, and everybody's I think not everybody, but somebody said something about like a witch, the Lancaster witch or something like that, and I don't know if that's actually Vermont or if they're just thinking it's Vermont because of Lancaster. Do you know anything about like a Lancaster witch or
You
something?
know, I'm not familiar with that story. That's gonna have to be something I look up. I do know that part of the New England vampire panic from the late 1800s is very well connected with some communities in like the southern part of the state. But
Hmm.
yeah, speaking of that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I'm not familiar with that story.
Huh.
There's so much
Okay.
in New England that
There.
you can look into, and I know some things, but I feel like I've only
Uh,
living in this area for so many decades. uh, I feel like I've only scratched the surface.
Right. Yeah. Same here. Like and I started my podcast just because I wanted to talk to people about the weird stuff, and I didn't really know a lot of the weird stuff. So like I went to my first my first event, and I didn't know like any of the who the speakers are, and everybody that I had became friends with through the podcast. So like there was these two people, Oren and Jenny, that I met there, and Oren was like in awe about Ron Moorhead, and I didn't know who Ron Moorhead was at the time. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because I'm still like new and learning things. So now that I know who Ron Moorhead is, now I wish I would have got a picture with him while I was there.
Uh, yeah,
But
yeah, that happens.
yeah, so it I love learning the things about all of this stuff. And actually I reference your podcast a lot for some of the stuff.
Right on.
I was doing research on the Nahani Valley, and you did a episode on that, so I listened to that and got a lot of information through that.
Yeah, yeah, that whole place is wild, and the stories that have come out of there. It's really quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah. um so they there's stories of Wendigos like in the New England area, like up Maine, New Hampshire, and stuff. And I want to say that there is said to be similar entities or the same entity of Wendigos in Vermont. Have you ever come across any Wendigo stories from your area?
I haven't come across Wendigo stories per se. I have heard people mentioning Maine, and my understanding of the folklore behind that is that they're typically found in colder climates, and I would say that Maine
Perfect.
fits it pretty perfectly. I know that a lot of
Yeah.
the Algonquin lore around the Great Lakes area is kind of like the up into Canada as well, as like the prime spot for it. But sometimes people do talk about sightings or encounters or stories of them uh, in our neck of the woods. But I I don't I don't know that I'm familiar with Wendigo stories in Vermont, but I am familiar with people encountering Bigfoot or Dogman in Vermont, which the Dogman part kind of I only found out after I started doing Strangeology,
Yeah.
and a researcher who is and a content creator who's based in New Hampshire actually had mentioned it to me, and I looked into it, and there's stories that are not too far from where I live right now, which I'm like, oh,
Oh boy.
okay, and so like the story behind the Dogman one is some people are calling it the Beast of Cold Hollow, and Cold Hollow, this area is kind of near like Enosburg, which isn't where I live. That's a couple hours away from me. But there was a woman within, I think, the last like 10 to 15 years who had started to hear strange like howling at night, and wolves haven't been in this part of the country for like over 100 years, although I think some are starting to make their way across Canada because they were reintroduced.
Yes.
And I've seen a coy dog before, which is like a hybrid between like a coyote and a dog, or maybe a coyote and a wolf. I don't know, but I remember driving home late one night years ago and seeing one run across the road, and it was huge. And I remember also when I was in like the 6th grade or something, my class took a field trip down to, first of all, we went to Salem, Massachusetts, which was cool. Got to go to the Witch Museum.
Nice.
Cool piece of history there. And we also went to this wolf sanctuary in the town of Ipswich. And this family had all this acreage, and they had a bunch of like a wolf pack that were like rescues, I think. They'd feed them like roadkill so they could have their natural raw diet. Although, can't really hunt roadkill, but those things are huge. They're really big animals. And they'll mess you up, but
Absolutely.
There's stories of dogmen type creatures in Vermont. And there was some video, I think it's on YouTube still, but there was, this woman had recorded the sounds of this thing howling near her house. And I think she actually caught some kind of video, and where you can kind of see through the trees it looks like a wolf head. You can't really tell if it's like a dog man, but there's definitely an animal there that has a wolf-like head, which is really interesting. But the story that took place near where I live in Vermont was like an old story from like the late 1800s, early 1900s, where some lumberjacks were out in, this area is now called, I think it's like the Groton State Park or something like that. And there's a lake there now. There's like I went to a Cub Scout camp out in that way when I was a kid, which, knowing this now, I'm just like, ooh. But there's a story where this pair of lumberjacks were like out there. They got separated in the woods, I guess. And one of them went missing, and then he finally like showed up like a day or two later, and he was just like insane. And he was talking about like seeing this wolf creature, a lougarou or rougarou. And some of the theories were that like maybe a werewolf or something had come over to Quebec and traveled down into Vermont. This is like these wild stories of that kind of thing. So yeah, no Wendigos, but that I'm aware of. But Bigfoot, Dogman stories. It's interesting that they're, you don't think Vermont really has much going on. Obviously there's Champ in Lake Champlain, although I've had so many people like get mad at me because I have a merch shop, and I designed this 50 states of cryptids map, cryptids and legends, and I did Champ for Vermont. And anytime I'm at a festival and a New Yorker comes by, they're like, no, that's our cryptid. I'm like, well, we can share. The Champ
anyway.
Museum's in Burlington, Vermont. Get over it now.
Yeah, it is.
And the Mancy photo, Sandra Mancy was in Vermont when she took the photo of Champ back in the 70s. So there you go.
So boo.
Yeah.
That's funny. I have a story that
I'm pretty sure it was a dog man, but I don't know because I can't tell. But it was accompanied by a pack of coyotes, and I was living in Shapley, Maine at the time, and there was always coyotes in my yard and stuff, and I
Yeah.
just saw red glowing eyes and had that like impending doom feeling. And just like as soon as I felt that feeling, because my dog, I had woken up that night to my dogs barking at the coyotes,
Yeah.
and there was one that was limping in my driveway pretending to be like hurt, and I turned my light on for it, and I was contemplating going out, and then I just saw the glowing eyes, and I was just like, and it was like it was right above a boulder that was in the, you know how like all of New England has these rock walls that,
Yeah.
separate properties in the rural areas.
Yep.
Well, that was what it was, and it was this huge boulder, and the boulder was like about my height, a little bit taller than me, and the eyes were just above it. And I was just like, "What the hell? I've never seen anything like that before."
Wow.
And I just got this impending doom, just like this severe sense of dread. And I shut the light off. That coyote that was pretending to be hurt just like turns around, runs away, and I was like, "Oh, that thing wasn't hurt." So I turned and I got my rifle, and I sat. My dogs instantly, like as soon as I got that feeling, my dog stopped barking and trying to get outside.
Yeah.
And I sat on my couch with my rifle, expecting something to try and get in the house. And my dogs just sat there with me, and then I I ended up waking up the next morning like this, and I was like, "Oh, my neck." Because I was way too scared to leave the open, living room to like a confined room. You know what I mean? Because the living room was so big that I could like find some kind of escape. There was a window, there was a back door, the front door, whichever way it decided to come in, I was going to be able to escape. So
Yeah.
I didn't attribute at the time. I didn't attribute it to a dog man. I just didn't know what it was. And then I think it was 2020 when I actually started listening to podcasts, and I came across paranormal podcasts and stuff like that. And I started like 2020 was the first time I ever heard of Dogman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I was just like, and the more stories I listened to Dogman encounters, I'm like, you know what? I think that may have been a Dogman or
Wow.
of some kind. So
Super, super interesting.
In a world where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, prepare to journey beyond the veil of reality to uncover secrets that defy explanation. Welcome to a Dead Letter Podcast, where we delve into the mysterious and unexplained phenomena that have fascinated humans for centuries. In each episode, we will explore some of the most intriguing and spine-tingling aspects of the paranormal world. But beware, for the line between reality and the supernatural is thinner than you think. Will you dare to listen?
Are you familiar with the Palmyra Wolfpack story?
no, I am not.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to mention to anyone who's never heard coyotes at night, it's a really unsettling sound.
It
In
really
and of
is.
itself, but seeing some kind of red glowing eyes that are above a boulder that's maybe over 6 feet tall.
Yes.
That's a little bit concerning. I did an episode on the Palmyra Wolfpack and in Palmyra, Maine, and there's this story of a family who had bought an old farmhouse on this property that was just surrounded by woods. There was one very long driveway in and out, and it was just surrounded by this crazy thick forest that, it was very, very isolated. And it was a husband and wife that moved in there. I think they had a son, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I did the episode, but they lived there for a while, and they just kind of wanted to have this quiet country life. And the husband and his wife loved to go out on their covered porch every night to, have a beverage and just kind of settle down for the evening. And after they had lived there for, I want to say it was like 6 or 9 months or something. I don't think it had been a year quite yet. And he was out there one evening and he noticed something was like rustling out in the woods, and he grabbed his son and they went out to go investigate, because they didn't know if it was like a person that was trespassing or what was going on. And I believe it was in the winter, if I remember correctly. And they go out and they're trying to like make their way into the forest. And I think they must have had like at least like 500, 700 feet of like open pasture before you hit the forest, the tree line. And they're in there, they can hear that there's like something big moving around, and they can't quite see through the forest because it's just like so thick and overgrown, and there's snow, and like they have their flashlights, but they can't see anything except that they hear something that starts flanking them like through the trees, and it's following their movements. So eventually they decide to head back to the house. Nothing else happens that evening, but a few months later, the husband is on the porch, and back up just a second. The husband had a collection of guns, and this is very important, that his wife didn't like him having in the house. And they had a big barn, and so she was like, you have to store those out in the barn and like keep them locked up. That'll come into play later. But so he's out on the porch one evening, and I think this is like the spring at this point, and he sees out in the pasture what looks to be like 4 or 5 dogs, like big dogs, maybe coyotes. He's not quite sure what they are, and he's just kind of looking at them, and he can tell that they're kind of looking towards the house at him. And I can't remember all the details, but one of them stands up on 2 legs, and he's just like, oh no. And runs into the house, and he's like yelling to his wife, like, lock all the doors and like the windows. There's like something out there. And eventually they're like waiting in the house, and they hear these things come up to the house, and they come up on the covered porch. They're walking around, sniffing around. They're scratching at like the walls to see if there's like any kind of weak point. And they go up to their upstairs, and they have these like thin, because, what do you need curtains for if you're surrounded by the woods? But they have like, thin curtains, like sheer curtains that you can kind of see through.
Yeah.
And they cover them, but they're like hiding upstairs and trying to be quiet, because they're like, there's like some big animals out there that are like up to no good. And all of a sudden they hear like a crash on the covered porch roof, which leads up to the second floor, and the windows are right there. It's one of these things. It jumped up and it starts walking around, and they see its silhouette go by like the window in their bedroom, and they're just like, trying to stay silent. And I think it eventually goes back down. And the husband is like, we either got to get out of here, or like, I need to go get my guns out of the barn so we have something to protect ourselves with. And they wait for a while until like all the rustling and sound has stopped. They think the animals, whatever these things are, have given up, and they have wandered back into the woods. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to go make a run for the barn, which is like across their like big gravel driveway parking lot type of area where they park their cars. And he's making his way out there. And I think they had like a motion detector light. And he trips it. So like lights up where he is, and he's almost to the barn door, like fumbling with his keys. And all of a sudden he stops and he can see like 5 pairs of red eyes just beyond the light in the shadow, all staring him down. And he's just like, oh God. And then he like turns around and just books it back to the house and locks the door. And these things come back and they're like scratching around again. And just like, they waited out till the morning, and thankfully whatever they were had disappeared. But when they went outside, they could see that like their house was physically damaged by like something clawing at the clapboard on the outside, and there were footprints and stuff. And I think the story went that like they sold the house, but it's unknown exactly where it was, how legit the story was. But from stories I've read, testimony and stuff, shout out to I'm not sure if you know Aaron Deese. He's put out a book, and he's putting out another book through Small Town Monsters Publishing. His first book was the Dogman Triangle in Texas, where there's been so many sightings of these dogmen type creatures. And like people are seeing something that's not Bigfoot out there. That's I would say on an order of magnitude more terrifying, because these things seem quite dangerous and mean. And also terrifying looking, right? Like you don't want to mess with some 6, 7, 8 foot tall clawed beast with a mouthful of steak knives. So
yeah, for sure. That story sounds sort of similar. So maybe it's the same story, but my friend Nomar Slevik, he
I know Nomar. I've met him before. Yeah,
he's writing something on it. I think that might be what because he sent it to me in an email. Because I know he posted something on Instagram about a Dogman pack. So I'm assuming that's the same story, and it sounds like what you just described. But
it very well might be.
Yeah. Nomar's a good guy too.
Yeah. I went to Fortean Fest back in, I think it was 2021 now. Paranormal 5, the folks from Paranormal 5, you just had them on. They hosted it. I think they're doing it again this spring, maybe. I'm not sure.
It's June 8th. I'm gonna be vending.
Summer.
I'm gonna be vending there.
Nice. Yeah. Good times.
So,
good times.
Yeah, they're good people too, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So what'd you think about Sanford when you came down to Fortean Fest?
Oh, it's just any other New England town, I suppose. It was nice because the other events that I had gone to vend at before were very long drives. I had gone to West Virginia for some, Kentucky, and it was nice to have like a 2-hour drive to go to one. I will say though that the Sasquatch Calling Contest Festival in Whitehall, New York is super fun too. It's also very close, which is just like a big old craft fair, and it's Bigfoot themed, and they have like a calling contest at the end of the day right down on the river. And it's a super fun time for sure.
Nice. Do you have an idea of when the next one is?
Let's see. I'm working on doing more events this year, but good. I think the first one I'm doing is the Withville UFO festival down in Virginia, and I think that's actually the weekend of June 8th. Actually, I think. And I'll be at Monster Fest in Canton, Ohio, which is at the end of June. I'm going to be doing Squonkapalooza in Pennsylvania, which is August. I think it's late August. And I'll be doing the Whitehall Sasquatch Calling Fest again, and I'm working out a few other ones, but nothing else is confirmed quite yet.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have so far. I only have two that I'm vending, but I am going to the Monster Fest in Canton,
Oh, cool. See you
Ohio.
there then.
Just yeah. Hoping to see Alex Petikoff too.
Oh, Alex is
Meet
great.
him in person. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm also going. I'm gonna try. I don't know if I'm 100% sure because I went to Squonkapalooza this past year, so I want to go again.
Nice.
And that's I met a lot of cool people down there too. And it's I mean the traveling is a lot, but it's so much fun once you're there
Yeah.
and stuff, and it's almost worth it. But at the same time, I'm just like, now I gotta drive all the way back.
Yeah. Get a
Almost
little
shit
case
to,
of the
like, just
blues on the
fly.
way back. Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
If you're vending and you're selling merchant stuff, like it's doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
fly. Just like
Fly, no.
drive, get a van or something like that. I want to get a van someday, but because I have a lot of merch that I always bring.
Yeah. I see I see that you have quite a bit of things going on for your merch. But so have you ever had like an experience where you thought that maybe you could attribute to being like a cryptid sighting of some kind?
Yeah. So actually, like going back to the house I grew up in, it wasn't on my property. It was on a neighbor's property in the woods. I used to like to like run around because they have this really steep embankment on one side of their property, and I used to like to go there and just kind of like pull myself up on like tree roots that were exposed and just kind of mess around, and they didn't care. But there was one time where I was out there with one of my friends growing up, and we were just kind of tooling around in the woods, and all of a sudden we came up to this tree and we saw this thing that was kind of hanging off of it like this, and it was like looking down at us, and we didn't know what it was. It was kind of brown. It was maybe like, I don't know, this big, and it had these huge eyes, and like human primate simian type of hands. And we had no idea what this thing was, and it was just kind of looking at us, and we freaked out and we bolted. We're just like, what the hell is that thing? It's a monster. And I don't know, it was probably like 10 or 11 or something like that. And we went back later and it was gone. There wasn't anything hanging off that tree. And it most certainly, like, the only wildlife that we really had regularly in the area that climbed trees were squirrels, and raccoons, and that was about it. But it definitely wasn't either of those. And it wasn't a bear. It wasn't like a bear cub or anything. We would have been in big trouble if it was a bear cub. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I think there was one time in the entire time that I lived at that house in that town, there was like one black bear that came through our front lawn one day. My brother actually caught it on camera. But that was like the only time. And years later, you know, I was like, this thing is like a weird cryptid. I don't know like what it was, but I was checking out are you familiar with the band, the Mars Volta? Or
no.
Okay.
No.
So the Mars Volta, they're kind of like a prog rock, psych rock type of band that came out of the Band at the Drive-In. And they have this EP where they have this kind of mascot logo type of thing that shows a tarsier, which is like a simian type of primate monkey creature. And it looked exactly like that. And I was just like, what? And I looked it up and I'm like, these things don't live in this part of the world. They don't live in New England. They live in like tropical areas around the equator. I think in like Southeast Asia, Philippines, Indonesia type of place. And they're actually a lot smaller. They're like, they fit in like the palm of your hand. They're like very small, but they're nocturnal. They have these huge eyes. And that's like the closest thing I could equate it to. And it was just like, I don't know if it was an exotic pet that escaped or something, but the town that I grew up in was like farmers and the people that worked at IBM that didn't want to live in the city. So
Yeah.
I don't know who would be having an exotic primate hanging around. But that's the only like thing that I've ever witnessed personally. I do know of people who have seen things, stories I've read, and people who have mentioned things to me for like bipeds, like Bigfoot or Dogman type of things, but nothing that I've seen like that personally.
Okay. So have you ever heard of the agropelter?
I've heard of the agropelter, yeah, but I'm not terribly familiar with all of the lore behind it.
All right, so I'll reference my handy dandy handbook that I got here, if I can reach it. All right. So it's I don't know if you know this gentleman. His name's Christopher Packard. It's Mythical Creatures of Maine.
I'm gonna have to check that book out.
It's all the interesting cryptids that have been cited here in Maine. And the agropelter happens to be the very first one because he does it alphabetically.
Oh, nice.
So, but basically they look like a primate. They're in the trees.
Interesting.
So the agropelter are mean little ape-like creatures with the dangerous habit of throwing dead branches at people who disturb them. Their favorite target seems to be lumberjacks' heads.
Huh. Interesting.
That's
curious.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny thing. There's a lot of like stories of woodsmen and stuff being out there, and they call them their nickname is the Widowmaker. You know how the branch, they call it the branches that are just like stuck in the trees and that fall down and kill people.
Yep.
Apparently, a lot of the stories attribute the agropelters to have thrown that. But from the depiction, they don't really have like big eyes.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Huh.
It's a interesting thing. I mean, if those have been cited in Maine, I mean,
it's not a far stretch to be in Vermont or New Hampshire, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're just gonna go for. Oh, we don't have. Don't know if I'm gonna need. Do I need a thumbnail for this one? I don't know. Are we ready? If you love all things dark history and paranormal, you're in the right place. Hi, What was that? Do you hear that? I'm trying to record the introduction for my brand new YouTube channel, and there are noises coming from behind me, which there shouldn't be. Like, I'm completely home alone right now. It's a B&M chair. Cheap LEDs. It's just cardboard boxes. It's a puppy! Hi! And there's also a cat. There are no ghosts. I made it all up. I know, I got you with my good acting. Yeah, no, that's not what we're doing here. Because be real with me, have you ever found yourself 4 hours into a binge of a ghost hunting show with the shaking night vision camera footage and the wide-eyed ghost hunters screaming at their own shadows, thinking, there is absolutely no way this is real? Yeah, me too. And if I'm being totally honest with you, I am more interested in the history of a haunted house and the origins of an urban legend and the actual lived experiences of people that have encountered paranormal activity firsthand, rather than watching a group of people filming themselves in a dark room. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some amazing ghost investigators, especially on YouTube. Like, some of the investigations that I've seen are amazing, and I do absolutely live for a Class 8 EVP or like a terrifying image of a shadow figure. But most of the time, the context and the history make the haunting so much more compelling for me. And if that sounds like a bit of you, then I think we've just become best friends. So you're going to want to hit that subscribe button, because every week we are going to be sitting down and swapping ghost stories like a good old sleepover, chatting about all things morbid, mysterious, and macabre. Have you got a paranormal experience that you'd like to share, or do you know of a haunted location that you'd like me to cover? Please leave me a comment or throw me a DM over on Instagram. You can find me at Don't Scare Claire. I absolutely love hearing all about your encounters with what lies beyond our realm. I cannot wait to get into all the spooky things with you, and maybe we might learn a thing or two about some history too. I know, I promise I won't be like your boring history teacher. But until next time, sleep safe. You showing everyone your butthole? Yeah. That's not stable. I would not lean on that. Okay, we're done.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I had one of my old bandmates years ago told me this story. Like when he was in high school, he was just walking around on the dirt road that his friend, he was like hanging out with friends one night, and they decided to like go for a stroll. Like, what do you do when you're living in rural Vermont as a teenager? And he told me that like one night they heard this like kind of metal jangling up in a tree or something like that, and they saw like the shape of some kind of monkey looking creature up there, so they called it the Tin Monkey. I don't know if he was making that up, but sometimes weird things show up for you at the least expected times that you can't explain.
That's true. That is, I 100% endorse that statement. So, so another question I like to ask everybody that comes on. I know that, so the orange ball of light could be attributed to like a UFO or a ET entity, but do you have you ever seen a UFO or anything that you can attribute to that?
Yeah, I do. I've seen a few strange things in the sky over the years, mostly like weird lights or objects that seem to be behaving strange or will disappear behind a cloud and then not reappear on the other side. But I would say probably the most profound story that I have, this experience, which has stuck with me ever since, happened in 1997. I believe it was like early April, late March, that time of year. My brother had taken me out to go see the re-release of Empire Strikes Back. So we were at the movie theater. The movie got out around like 9:00. And we were driving back. My brother had a blue Volvo 240 at the time from like the late 80s. And I was sitting in the back seat because I kind of wanted to like lay down and maybe like rest my eyes because it was getting late. And we were driving down this long stretch of road on the way back. And my brother never liked to take the highway. He always liked to take the just like the regular state highway or country roads, shortcuts to get back home. And I was sitting up at the time, and I was sitting in the driver's side rear seat. And this was kind of near, it's near the Burlington International Airport. We were driving through the town of Williston, and I noticed at the end of oh no. Are we still here?
I don't know what the heck happened.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It just dropped out. Someone's listening in.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, occasionally it might have been me. Sometimes my internet drops out late at night for some reason. My ISP isn't the best.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, where's a good part to pick up on? Okay, so
You were in the back seat trying to rest your eyes, and then we'll just go from
yeah.
there.
Okay, so we're at the we're on this straightaway that's I think about like 3/4 of a mile. Speed limit's like 30 miles an hour, so we're not going like too fast. My brother used to drive like a maniac, but for whatever reason, he wasn't driving all that fast at that point in time. But at the end of this straightaway, there's a bank of trees, and the road dips down downhill into a river valley to like a main state highway, which eventually takes us home. And there's like open fields before the tree line. And at the time, I think there was like maybe like 2 or 3 houses around the area, but not too many. And I see these 3 lights over the tree line that we're headed to in a triangular formation. And they're pretty like big. They don't look like something that would be running lights on a plane. I've seen plenty of planes with their running lights and stuff landing at the airport over the years. Looked absolutely nothing like that. And the first thought in my head was like, oh man, that's like a really low plane. It was like just above the trees. So who knows, maybe like 100 feet, 200 feet in the air. And it wasn't really on the flight path or like the takeoff and landing path of the airport, which is like a couple miles away. And so I'm just like, what are these lights? I'm just like kind of cranking my neck, trying to see what they are, trying to peek through the front windshield. And I roll down the window because it's an old car. And I like poke my head out. And sure enough, those lights are still there, and it's not a plane. Because my second thought was maybe it was a reflection from, like, maybe there was a light in the car that was on, and nope, they were still sitting there stationary in the sky. At that point, I realized they weren't moving. With a landing plane, it would have changed position by that point in time, which is probably only like 10 to 15 seconds. And so these lights are just sitting there in triangular formation. And it's a pretty clear night. There's stars in the sky. It was like a crisp, early Vermont spring evening. And we're just getting closer to this thing. And I'm trying to like signal to my brother. I'm like, hey, like, do you see those things up there? And he's like, basically told me to like, shut it and like, stop talking. And I was just like, okay. And eventually we get to like the tree line where the road dips down, and I like look up out of the window and I can see this thing. We drive right underneath it. It's just sitting there stationary, no sound. And like all I could hear is probably like the wind coming from like the car movement, but there wasn't like the sound of like jet engines or any kind of weird like metallic buzzing. It was just like completely silent. And I could see the 2 lights, or 2 of the 3 lights. The third one was obscured because of the trees. And I was just like, what is this thing? And I couldn't see the stars in between the lights. So whatever it was a solid triangular object. And we just kept driving, didn't say a word about it until 15 years later or so at a family reunion. And the topic of aliens and UFOs came up somehow. And my brother was like, oh yeah, me and Jeff saw this like weird UFO one night driving home. And I was like, you bastard, you saw it too. And you told me. Yeah. He just didn't, I don't know. Maybe it was just a little too much for him at the time. I don't know.
He didn't want it to be acknowledged.
Yeah. He didn't want me to be scared or something like that. Cause he's my big brother. He's like 6 years older than me. So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, that story has stuck with me. And, later on when like Google Earth came out, one of the first things I did was go to this exact point on the map to kind of see if I can remember roughly like how big this thing was. And it was like at least as big, if not bigger than a 747. So something massive. And black triangle UFOs were seen a lot in like the late 80s, early 90s in like Belgium, and many other people have seen them. A lot of people are like, no, those are ours. It's the TR3B Black Manta or the Aurora Project or something like that. I don't know if it was extraterrestrial or if it was one of ours. I honestly don't know, but I saw something in the sky that night, and it was big, and it was there. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they've I've been hearing a lot lately that they've been saying that the triangular like UFOs are like our government, like the American government. It's their alien technology because the U.S. government works with aliens.
Right? Yeah, reverse engineered or something like that. I know there's like
Yeah.
some infamous clip that like Tom DeLonge showed on like the Joe Rogan podcast or something like that. That was like a night vision. You've probably seen it, but yeah,
Absolutely.
It looked very similar to that. Although I think the lights were proportionally a lot bigger on each tip than what was shown in that video, which may or may not be CGI anyway. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's hard to tell.
Yeah, some videos it's really hard to tell if it's CGI or AI or anything like that. Any of the the faked technology, but I actually reached out to Tom DeLonge on Instagram trying to get him on the podcast, but he'll probably never ever see that message.
Yeah, someone that high profile is probably pretty tricky to get a hold of, I would think, but who knows? Yeah. Just try your luck.
Yeah. Yeah. So, another question I love to ask: do you like horror? Are you like a horror fan?
I do like horror movies. I'm not like a horror movie buff. It's been really a long time since I've really watched a horror movie or anything new. Having kids and doing this really takes up most of my time, and having a band too. But yeah,
I feel you. So in that case, you might be able to pinpoint a lot easier what your favorite horror movie is then, if.
I would say Evil Dead 2.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that one too, man.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
I love
Close follow-up. I mean, the whole Evil Dead trilogy. I actually I never saw the remake that they did back in like 2011 or whatever. And I didn't get around to finishing the Ash versus Evil Dead series. I still need to. I watched the first season and I enjoyed it a lot, but I just haven't had time to get back to it. But I would say that close follow-up, like second movie, is Cabin Fever. Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah, that's a good one
with
too.
Ryder Strong.
That one messed with my head.
Yeah. It's just so goofy.
I was like, ugh. Yeah, but the Evil Dead has been my one of my favorites as well for a long time. The remake that they did, I liked it, but I just wish they had like Ash's character be the main one, but they went with a woman instead. And then the recent Evil Dead one was pretty good too, but I feel like it could have been better.
I think I saw a preview for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Ash versus the Evil Dead, that series is amazing. I loved it. I really wish they were gonna keep going, but I guess it got canceled or whatever.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah. Bruce Campbell's a pretty epic guy, so
yeah. He's pretty great. He's funny. I guess he improvised quite a bit through the Evil Dead series too. So.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, what do you got coming up next, man? What do you got going on next for you?
Oh, well, I'm in the middle of doing research for my season 3 finale of the show. the show's been on a little bit of a hiatus because of the holidays, and then other life stuff that's like gotten in the way of trying to get things done, which gotta roll with the punches. But yeah, there's that. I'm working on booking some pretty cool guest interviews for my next season, getting ready for those events that I mentioned, and just kind of trying to produce some more short form video content, as well as some more longer form content for my YouTube channel. Just getting the word out to people.
That's awesome, man. I'm really loving what you do and all that. I love the reels, the show. I think the last episode that I listened to of yours was uh the Fresno Nightcrawlers. That one was
Yeah.
a good one too.
Thank you.
I like
Thank you.
the I like the name of the episode you called it Pants.
It's everybody's favorite pair of pants. How can you go
Uh,
wrong?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you did it really well. Every time
Thanks.
I like look into something and you've covered it, I always listen to it just to like 'cause I don't know, I just feel like you do a really fantastic job with your research and to discuss all like avenues of all of the combined info. So,
Yeah, thanks.
um
I like to be
yeah, you're welcome.
thorough, and then every once in a while in the comment section, someone's like, "Did you even research this?" And I'm like, "Oh, come on." You just gotta laugh at stuff like that,
Yeah. Um, well, anyways, so if you don't mind, actually, the last question that I like to ask before we wrap it up is, are you finding fulfillment in all of the things that you're doing with your podcast and therefore?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't know what else I'd be doing right now, and it's a lot of fun. The whole cryptid, paranormal, UFO, Fortean realm has always been a passion of mine, at least in the background for most of my life, and to be able to kind of do this and have it be the thing that I'm doing um, is really cool, and I'm very much appreciative of all the support that I get to my entire audience on all the platforms I'm on. It's really cool. And yeah, thanks everyone out there for checking out Strangeology. It means a lot.
I think that's my favorite part about doing this podcast is the community and all the other podcasters, everybody just everybody just wants to help everybody, and it's amazing, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So and
Yeah.
again, would love to thank you for coming on because like I said earlier, like time is like the most valuable currency anybody can give you. And I appreciate you giving me your time tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much again for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, it's man, I've been looking forward to talking to you for a little bit now, so I'm glad that I finally got the chance. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and you
Sometimes it takes me a while to get around to to finding the time, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I a lot of people do. A lot of people do. You just gotta. Everybody's got lives to live, so I don't expect anybody to just instantly be like, yes, let's do this at this time, and then it always works out. It doesn't. It's not
Yeah.
always gonna work out. So.
Right.
Um, but anyways, with that, everybody, that is the show today. So please, if you're not following Jeff at Strangeology, please do so. I enjoy listening, and I 100% know that you'll enjoy listening. So go check his stuff out. Other than that, like, follow, share, subscribe. That's one of the best ways you can help this show grow, and also rate and review. That helps a lot too. But other than that, question everything and stay weird.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.
Because in the end, none of us have very long on this earth. Life is fleeting. And if you're ever distressed, cast your eyes to the summer sky, when the stars are strung across the velvety night, and when a shooting star streaks through the blackness, turning night into day. Make a wish.